Okay, welcome. Hello, Dr. Bittel. Dr. Bittel is joining us today. He is a professor in the College of Biosciences here at KCU on the Kansas City campus. Dr. Bittel received his PhD from the University of Missouri in the area of molecular and cellular biology. Then went on to do a postdoc at the University of Minnesota, followed by another postdoc at KU Med in Kansas City. After that, he joined the Department of Genetics as the Director of Research at Children's Mercy Hospital. And about 3 years ago, joined KCU and has brought his research and his talents to the College of Bioscience. So welcome, Dr. Bittel.
Be here.
Today, we're just going to run through some of what your research is and kind of what your focus is on right now. So kind of get us started with maybe a 30-second or so elevator pitch of your current research focus.
Okay, so the last 10 years while I was at Children's Mercy Hospital, I worked together with the cardiac surgeons there on a project investigating the underlying genetic and epigenetic contributions to congenital heart defects. So in a 30-second statement, that is what I do. We analyze tissue taken from children at the time of reconstructive surgery to repair significant damage to their heart that they were born with, so a severe congenital defect. And we began this project by analyzing that tissue and comparing it to normally developing tissue from a baby's heart who did not have a heart defect. The story of how we got that control tissue is half an hour long, but I'm happy to talk about it at any time. And that allowed us to make a comparison that really at the time was unique. No one else had done that sort of comparison. And so that laid the foundation for where we went then in the next 6 or 7 years. So
Great.
That's the elevator pitch.
Great. So what you work on now is similar.
In fact, it is. I have a courtesy appointment at Children's Mercy. I still maintain the collaboration with the head of cardiac surgery there. We meet once a week, every week, and sometimes more often to discuss how things are going. My students who do research, students from KCU, both COB students and medical students, join in on those weekly discussions when they have time. If they're not in class, we like to have them join us. We talk about the projects that they're working on. They bring us up to date, as well as I bring them, the group, up to date on other projects that we continue to work on.
That's great. It's great to have that kind of collaboration.
It is a lot of fun. And the people I work with at Children's Mercy are really great. Old friends, I've known them now for more than 10 years. So we have a good team.
Great. So, some of this has already been answered, obviously, but maybe tell us why you find your research important. So what's some possible applications, I guess, for physicians based upon what it is you study?
So that is a question that could take a long time, but I'll try to be as succinct as I can. Nearly 1 out of 100 babies, so almost 100% or 1% of babies are born with a pretty significant defect in their heart. And probably anybody who's listening to this either knows someone or perhaps they were born with at least a hole in their heart. The interesting thing about that, one of the interesting things about it for me as a geneticist, is that we really don't know what the underlying genetic contribution is for most of those. Some of them we do, about maybe up to 30%. We really know, okay, here's a mutation in this gene, or here's a defect on this chromosome that leads to a heart defect. But somewhere around 70%, we don't know, despite the fact that the last 10 years, NIH has really funded a very focused a consortium focused on understanding heart defects. And I won't go into, there's a lot of details behind that, But despite that very intense effort and a lot of resources spent on it, we still don't have a good, clear mathematical description of where those genetic contributions are coming from. We know there are a lot of genetic contributions that has been established, but we can't pinpoint what they are. And again, I can talk for some time about my ideas about where those genetic components are going to be found. But to some extent, the work that I have done in the last 7 years illustrates that. And so in terms of the value for a physician, my friend, the chief of cardiac surgery, one of the things he says about this research is most of the kids that we do surgery on do really well. They come out and they live a very normal life. But a few of them don't, and we don't know why. There is no obvious underlying physical problem that at least a surgeon or a cardiologist can really say, okay, this was a compounding factor. And so from his perspective, he believes that we may be able to find genetic components that help to identify kids that may need closer follow-up and a better prognosis. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is what we always talk about is that when you don't know what the origin of some health defect is, you don't know what you might be able to do to intervene. And until we know what the real causes of congenital heart defects are, it's hard for us to be able to say, okay, here's some things we can do to prevent that. One little thing is we could do screening when a couple gets married. If we know the underlying genetic components, we could say to them, okay, the two of you have these combined risk factors, and therefore you're going to have a little bit greater chance. And as we go forward with our ability to genetically alter or maybe select genetically fertilized eggs that don't have much of a risk for heart defects, until we have the tools for selecting that, we won't be able to use them. And I'll just, one quick sentence. Right now, the technology is there for choosing fertilized eggs of a specific genetic type. And if you knew that you were at high risk for any disorder, including heart defects, and you knew what the components were, you could say, okay, we're going to choose this egg instead of this egg because we know this one does not have the genetic components for heart defect. That's one simple application. That is a real world application available right now if we knew what the genetic components were.
Right. Wow. Pretty heavy. But it's great to be involved in something like that, I would imagine, where you're, there's a direct link to what you're doing to the medical field.
There is a very direct link, and it's a lot of fun. This is a puzzle, like so much biological research is. And it's a complicated puzzle, and it makes it fun to contribute to solving that puzzle. That is a big part of it. I think anybody who does research views it as, okay, here's a puzzle. How can we solve this? How can we add a little piece to completing the picture that this puzzle creates?
Right. So when you think about research in general, how do you feel, or why do you feel research in general, whether it's in your lab or somebody else's, is important as part of a medical school education?
Well, having come from Children's Mercy, which is an academic pediatric hospital, there is great emphasis there placed on doing research. And for many reasons. One, it keeps you on top of your field. You know what's being done at the cutting edge. Even if you're not quite there yourself, you still know what everybody else is doing. And that makes you a better physician. Also, I think in doing research for medical students, it gives you an appreciation for how hard it is to do research, how sometimes agonizingly and frustratingly slow it can be. Also, it gives you an appreciation for sometimes how subjective it can be. Interpretations are made, and as in a physician, for a physician who maybe is going to make some interpretations about based on what they've read in the literature, the current research on a particular topic. If you've never been in a lab, it's difficult to appreciate how information got into that paper, both good and perhaps not so good. Um, so information gets chosen to be put into a manuscript that you are now reading. And so working in the lab, one of the additional benefits is a healthy degree of skepticism. When you read a manuscript, you look for potential bias, and that's a good thing, especially for physicians. So those are a couple of really valuable components to doing even a small research project for future physicians.
Yeah, yeah. I've found, and I've talked with some other people lately about this, the idea of physicians playing such an important part in this COVID pandemic as far as educating the public
Mhm.
and, having a healthy understanding of what research is and how it works, I think really helps in that dialogue between a physician and their patient or really anyone in the general public who maybe doesn't have that knowledge.
Mhm. Mhm.
uh,
I absolutely agree.
so um okay, so over your time, how many students, roundabout students or residents or fellows have you worked with or trained in the past, and then what are some things that they've gone on to do after training with you?
Wow. So I'm off the top of my head, it's maybe somewhere around 15 because I started the dean, Dr. White, the dean of COB, connected me with a student probably 10 or 11 years ago. She was a medical student here. She was interested in cardiac development. She had just come to KCU. She'd been a fighter pilot in the Air Force.
Wow.
And she was obviously a very impressive young woman. She was a little older than the average student here. I think she was in her mid 30s, but a very impressive young woman. Um, and she was just interested in doing a research project. And I still get a Christmas card from her every year. And she came to my lab. We worked on a project over the course of the summer. We got a publication out of it. We still refer to that publication as part of what I do. And she went on to graduate, obviously. She's now in Michigan. I'm trying to remember what her specialty is. Um, she's not in family practice. I can't recall for sure what she wound up specializing in, but I think she might have done a residency at the University of Wisconsin. What's the one in the northern part of the state?
River Falls, I
Wisconsin.
don't know.
There's a medical school in the northern part of
Oh, okay.
Wisconsin.
Yeah, I'm not
Um,
sure.
oh, shoot, I can't remember it now. Anyway, she did a residency there. It's a very well-known medical school. And now I think she's in practice now. But again, I can't remember specialty. But then beginning with her, I had one or two medical students for probably over a period of 4 years while I was still at Children's Mercy,
Mhm.
coming from here who were interested in doing projects. All of them are now graduated, or a couple are in residency right now, I think. Um, and so beyond that, I haven't maintained contact with any of those early students except for her. Her name was Amy Rodemoyer. Um, if any of you would be interested in going back and seeing what year she graduated. Currently, I am working with 3 medical students from the COM. One started with me about a year and a half ago, and we were just finishing up the manuscript that he worked on. Another one was last summer's, she had an SSRF fellowship, and we're just finishing up her manuscript. And then I have a new student who's just starting, who will be applying for this summer's SSRF projects. So, and then I have from the COB, I have 3 students who are on a 2-year track and 3 students in the 1-year track who are doing just a research elective rotation where they work in the lab just over the course of this 1 semester. So we have plenty of activity going on in the lab, lots of projects, lots of irons in the fire that we try to manage.
Yeah, sounds great. So my final question for you then, Dr. Bittel, is what's one piece of advice that you would give to students in general? And it can be, about research or really whatever pops into your head as far as advice for students.
Mm. Well, gosh, I don't know. There's so many things. I would say keep an open mind. Always keep an open mind. Things change all the time, and try not to get too fixed in your beliefs about anything, because new information arises all the time, and so you should be willing to fairly evaluate wherever that information comes from and try to be objective about it, and give new things that you hear and see a fair chance.
Yeah. That kind of comes back to the pandemic as well, right? We see
Yeah,
so
it
much
really
that
does.
has
Yeah,
happened recently, and whether it's people who understand science or not, coming back and talking about, well, why do they keep changing things and why do the
yeah,
recommendations change? But as you say,
yeah,
if you keep that open mind and realize that science isn't perfect and research isn't perfect all the
yeah,
time, as long as we keep
absolutely.
learning and modifying based upon what it is we see and observe, things will move in the right direction. But I really appreciate you taking the time, Dr. Bittel, to talk with me about your lab and some of the research that you have going on. I know that the university is grateful for what you bring and the opportunities that you provide our students. So, I think I can speak for the university when I say that. And I look forward to speaking with you personally more as we move forward and kind of get through the pandemic and back on campus doing research. So, thank you again.
Well, thank you, Dr. Kramer. This was fun. And I would just extend an invitation to anyone who wants to hear more about the genetics and importantly, the epigenetics of the regulation of human heart development. I'll be glad to talk with anybody anytime.
Great. And if anybody asks me about it, I'll send them your way as well.
Great. Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much.